For years, I had worked tirelessly in the music industry, producing tracks for underground artists out of my cramped apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was all I had, and I hoped that one day something would click. Then, one night, I received a message that would change everything. I was invited to an exclusive party with Diddy, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to network with some of the biggest names in the business. Diddy's parties were famous, and I knew this could be my big break. Still, I had heard rumors of strange things happening at these parties, things that went way beyond networking. But I shrugged it off, not letting ghost stories scare me away from an opportunity like this. The night of the party, I drove up to the mansion in the Hollywood Hills. The winding road was lined with tall trees that cast dark shadows in the moonlight. My heart raced as I approached the imposing gates that opened slowly, almost as if they were expecting me. No questions, no hesitation, just an invitation into the unknown. As soon as I got out of the car, I was immediately searched by security. But the search was more intense than anything I had ever experienced. They took everything, my phone, my wallet. They even checked my shoes. It was clear that they didn't just want to make sure I was safe. They wanted to make sure I couldn't record anything. I realized that what happened inside was supposed to stay inside. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was surreal. Celebrities, models, producers, all the people I had only seen on TV or in magazines. The music was loud, pounding in my chest, but something felt off. The lighting was dim, casting eerie shadows, and people's eyes seemed blank. They were laughing and talking and drinking, but it felt hollow, like they weren't really there. I tried to focus on networking, but every time I tried to talk to someone, their attention was drawn to a door at the back of the room, guarded by two large men. It was slightly open, just enough to see something going on behind it. I couldn't resist looking, and then a woman appeared beside me. She was stunning, dressed in black, with a disturbing smile. She handed me a glass of champagne and whispered in my ear, "You have been chosen." I asked, "Chosen for what?" But she just smiled cryptically and pointed to the door. Hesitant but curious, I walked toward it. The guards didn't stop me. They stepped aside. Beyond the door was a narrow hallway lit only by flickering candles. The music faded, replaced by low, rhythmic chanting. My heart was pounding, but my feet kept moving. At the end of the hallway, I pushed open a heavy wooden door and entered a room that felt like a nightmare. The room was huge, dimly lit by candles, with a stone altar in the center. Around it were people in black robes, their faces hidden, chanting in a language I couldn't understand. And there, tied to the altar, was a goat its eyes wide with fear, struggling against the ropes. One of the robed figures stepped forward, holding a large curved knife, and the chanting grew louder. Before I could process what was happening, the knife came down and blood splattered across the altar. Frozen with fear, I realized this was no celebration. This was something dark, something I should never have been a part of. I tried to run, but the guards were everywhere. I stayed and did whatever they told me, though I barely remember any of it. My mind was a blur, and I know now that I was heavily drugged. When I woke up the next morning, I was shirtless and wearing someone else's boxers. The party had been all white, but my clothes were gone. My body felt sore, especially my legs, which were so stiff that I could barely move. It wasn't the kind of soreness you get from dancing. It felt deeper, like my muscles had been pushed to their limits. I didn't want to think about what was happening. I was too afraid to ask questions or try to remember. I just had to leave. When I finally got outside, I got my phone back from the guards. When I saw the time, my stomach sank. I had been inside for days, not hours. I don't know how I lost so much time, but the moment I left the mansion, I knew I couldn't stay in that world anymore. I threw away my SIM card, deleted my social media, and left town without telling anyone. I had to get as far away as possible. Months later, I still don't remember what happened during those missing days. Sometimes days go by and I have no memory of them. It feels like time is slipping away from me, and there are moments when I feel like I'm still being watched as if they never really let me go. The invitation arrived on a warm summer evening in the form of a sleek black card with gold lettering, an invitation to one of Diddy's exclusive parties. I was starting to make a name for myself in the music industry, but I knew this party could open even more doors. Everyone whispered about Diddy's parties, but no one talked openly about what went on inside, which only made them more intriguing. The instructions were clear: show up alone at midnight. My heart raced with a mixture of excitement and fear as I read it. I knew what this could mean for my career. Those who attended these parties weren't just guests. They were the elite. On the night of the party, I stood at the bottom of the hill and looked up at the mansion, which looked like something out of a Gothic dream. It was hidden behind iron gates surrounded by dense trees that swallowed the night. A strange feeling stirred in my gut, but I pushed it aside. It was Diddy's party after all, and it had to be amazing. I stepped out of the sleek black car that had picked me up, and immediately the air felt thick with tension. The closer I got to the mansion, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The windows of the mansion emitted a faint, eerie glow, casting strange shadows across the grounds. As I climbed the stairs to the massive front doors, I hesitated, a feeling of being watched creeping over me. Just before I knocked, the door swung open, and a man in a black suit stood inside. His face was blank, his eyes cold. "Miss Ventura, welcome. Mr. Combs has been expecting you," he said softly, sending a shiver down my spine. How did they know I was coming? I hadn't confirmed or even responded to the invitation. But before I could ask, the man stepped aside and led me inside. The interior of the mansion was stunning, though not in a comforting way. The rooms were dimly lit, casting long shadows across the expensive furniture and strange artwork that lined the walls. Celebrities, producers, and models filled the room, all laughing and drinking champagne. But there was something unsettling about them. They seemed distant, as if their minds weren't fully present. The longer I stayed, the more I felt like an outsider. That's when I saw him, Diddy, standing at the far end of the room, surrounded by some of the most powerful figures in the industry. He commanded the room with ease. When our eyes met, everything else faded away. His gaze was intense, sharp, and for a moment I felt he could see right through me. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that sent shivers down my spine. "Cassie," he said softly as he walked toward me, the crowd parting as if under a spell. "I've been waiting for you." I opened my mouth to speak but couldn't find the words. There was something about him, dark, magnetic, that both attracted and frightened me. When he reached me, he took my hand. His grip was tight, cold. "I have heard a lot about you," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "But this is your moment, isn't it?" I nodded, my heart racing, overwhelmed by the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something dangerous. "You have potential, Cassie," he continued, his smile widening. But it wasn't reassuring. There was something predatory about it. But in this world, you have to be willing to give to get. I swallowed, trying to make sense of what he was saying. What do you mean? I whispered. Diddy leaned closer, his breath cold against my skin. There are rules to this game, he whispered, his voice cold. Rules you can't break, but once you're in forever. A wave of panic swept through me. His words felt more like a warning than an offer. I took a step back, but his grip on my hand tightened. I can make you a star, he said, his voice soft but firm. I can give you everything you've ever dreamed of, but there is a price. I looked into his eyes and saw something dark lurking there, something ancient, hungry. I didn't understand what he was offering, but I knew it was more than just a record deal. My mind was spinning with fear and confusion. I don't understand, I stammered, pulling my hand away. His smile faded and turned cold. You will. As the night wore on, the party grew stranger. The music blasted louder, vibrating through me in a way that felt deeper than just sound. The faces around me began to blur, and I wandered aimlessly, growing increasingly uneasy. It was as if I was being watched from all sides. Every time I turned around, Diddy's eyes were on me, waiting. At one point, I found myself alone in a dark hallway, the sounds of the party fading away. My footsteps echoed off the marble floor as I walked, my heart pounding. I knew I shouldn't be here. Something was wrong. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible but unmistakable. Cassie. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The voice seemed to come from within the walls. I turned, but the hallway was empty. Cassie. The whisper came again, closer this time. Fear gripped my chest as I backed away, wanting to run, but feeling like my feet were rooted to the ground. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a large, ornate mirror at the end of the hallway. In its reflection, I saw myself, but I wasn't alone. Behind me, lurking in the shadows, was Diddy. His face had turned into something monstrous, his eyes hollow, his smile twisted. And behind him were others, pale, lifeless figures. Their faces drained of all energy, empty. I spun around, but the hallway was empty again. My heart raced as the realization hit me. This wasn't just a party. It was a trap. And I wasn't just a guest. I was the victim. Without another thought, I ran out of the hallway, grabbed my things and left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. I just wanted to get out of that mansion, to escape whatever dark forces were at play inside. But even months later, I can't shake the feeling that part of me is still trapped there. Every now and then, when I'm alone at night, I hear those whispers again. And when I look in the mirror, I'm afraid that one day I'll see him standing behind me, watching. Because in Diddy's world, once you're in, and there's no way out. Dancing was everything to me. It wasn't just my career, it was who I was. From the moment I could walk, I was dancing, whether it was ballet, hip-hop, or just moving to music that only I could hear. When I finally got my big break as one of Jennifer Lopez's backup dancers, I felt like all my years of hard work had paid off. I was ecstatic. This was my moment. But little did I know that moment would lead me into something I still can't fully comprehend, something I wish I could forget. The night of the performance was electrifying. The crowd roaring, the lights, the energy. It was everything I had dreamed of. After the show, as I was catching my breath backstage, someone from Diddy's team approached me. Diddy's having a party tonight, they said. You're invited. My heart skipped a beat. Everyone knew about Diddy's legendary parties, the kind that only a select few ever got to attend. It was the kind of invitation that could open doors in the industry doors that were usually locked. Without hesitation, I said yes. On the way to the mansion, I stared out the window, trying to calm the excitement that was bubbling inside me. This felt like the moment that would change my career, but a small voice in the back of my mind whispered doubt. I'd heard the stories about Diddy's parties, the wild, crazy tales that people in the business joked about but never quite explained. I pushed them aside. What could be wrong with an exclusive party? When we arrived, the mansion was huge, almost intimidating in its size. The first thing that struck me was the silence. Located on the outskirts of Los Angeles, the mansion seemed cut off from the usual sounds of the city as soon as we passed through the iron gates. Even the air felt heavy, pressing down on me. Inside, the party was everything I expected. Lavish, extravagant, with gold accents and fine art everywhere. Celebrities, models, producers, everyone was laughing and drinking and dancing. But as time passed, something felt off. It wasn't the luxury. That was normal. It was the way people were behaving. There was a strange tension in the air, an undercurrent of something darker simmering beneath the surface. I tried to blend in, making small talk and sipping my drink, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. People would disappear into rooms and come back, but they weren't the same. They seemed distant, as if their bodies were present, but their minds were elsewhere. Their eyes were blank, their expressions off, as if something had changed in them. Hours passed and the party only intensified. The people became louder, wilder, and the atmosphere more surreal. That's when someone grabbed my hand. It wasn't violent, but it was firm enough that I couldn't pull away. I turned around but didn't recognize them, just another guest, I assumed. They smiled at me with a strange, knowing grin, and without a word began to lead me through the crowd to a staircase at the back of the mansion. I hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the party, but the music and noise seemed to fade as we walked. We went upstairs to a small, dark room. It was almost completely silent except for the muffled bass coming from downstairs. The curtains were drawn and the air was thick and oppressive. A large round table sat in the middle, surrounded by a group of people who didn't acknowledge me. They seemed to be waiting for something, or someone. One of the men, dressed in a sharp suit, leaned toward me and whispered, "The party doesn't really start until after midnight." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I felt a wave of unease, as if I had stepped into something I didn't understand. I wanted to leave, to go back downstairs, but the door we came through was already closed. I was trapped. The air felt heavier, and my mind began to blur. That was the last clear memory I had of that night. When I woke up, it wasn't the next morning. It was 3 days later. I found myself in a room I didn't recognize. The curtains were still drawn, letting in only a sliver of pale light. My head ached and my body felt sore, as if I'd been moving non-stop for hours. But I couldn't remember dancing or anything else. Other people were scattered around the room, passed out on couches and the floor, all in various stages of exhaustion. I tried to piece together what had happened, but it was like trying to hold on to smoke. My phone was dead, and when I finally plugged it in, the date on the screen sent a chill down my spine. It had been 3 days since the party. I left the mansion without talking to anyone. No one stopped me or even seemed to notice that I was leaving. When I got home, my family and friends were frantic. They had been trying to reach me for days, but I couldn't explain what had happened. I didn't know where I had been or why I couldn't remember. In the days that followed, I tried to dance again, but something had changed. It felt like my body wasn't mine anymore, like I was disconnected from it. Every time I walked into the studio, I felt like I was being watched, not by the other dancers or the choreographer, but by something unseen. Shadows would move in the corners of my vision, and some nights I'd wake up in a cold sweat, sure that someone was standing at the foot of my bed watching me. It was as if the energy, the passion I once had for dancing had been drained from me, leaving someone hollow. A few weeks later, I stopped coming to rehearsals. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened at that party had taken something away from me, something I couldn't get back. I confided in a close friend in the business and told her everything: the party, the 3 missing days, the strange flashes of memory I couldn't quite explain. She tried to comfort me, but I could see in her eyes that she didn't really believe me. How could she? How could anyone believe such a thing? One night she asked me if I had seen Diddy since the party. I shook my head, but I felt like he was still watching me. Her face turned pale. "What do you mean?" she asked. I explained that sometimes when I was alone, I had this overwhelming feeling of being watched. How shadows would shift in my vision, and some nights I'd wake up convinced that someone was standing at the foot of my bed just watching me. She didn't say anything because what could she say? There was nothing she could do, nothing I could do. Whatever happened that night, whatever I experienced in those missing 3 days, had changed me in a way that could never be undone. I never danced again. The vibrant, passionate dancer I once was replaced by someone who was always looking over her shoulder, always wondering what really happened that night. To this day, I can't walk past a mirror without looking over my shoulder, afraid I'll see something standing behind me, because some invitations come with a price, and I learned that the hard way.